So I have two cones in a plastic bucket that I have used for a recycle venture. And I take one thread from one cone, one thread from the other cone, and I tie a knot at the end. It's called an anchor knot. I'm tying this knot because I need to be able to anchor it onto the peg, the very first peg. Once I tie the knot, I will actually open the threads so that I can see the knot. Once I open the threads and see the knot, I can place the knot on the outer side of the peg and then easily begin my measuring of the warp thread. The design of this particular warp board is 1 yard by 23 times. So it would be a total of 23 yards. If I use the entire board, I don't have to use the entire board. I can use any number that I want to on this particular pegboard. When I'm done getting the number of warp yards on the pegboard there, I then snip the end and get ready to knot the end. It's another anchor knot, and this is why. In this little plastic cubby container, I have a whole bunch of embroidery floss bobbins, which I actually use for warping threads for weaving. And so I use a tool to wrap that bobbin, and I need a knot on this particular thread at the end of this particular thread to be able to wrap that thread onto that bobbin. 2 or 3 times suffices, and here's the bobbin. It has a hole in it, and you put it in the winder where the hole is as well, and it has a pin. So for you men that are out there, if you remember cotter pins, this is kind of the same. Well, it actually is the same concept. It holds in place by itself, and then you turn it. So there's a little slot. Well, there's two of them on the bobbin. You make sure the knot is on one side of the slot, and then you wind it. Now you kind of have to be careful which way you wind it. It depends on which way you want to turn it. If you're going to turn it away from you, you need the bobbin thread to go down so it'll wrap right. If you're going to go backwards with it, where you're going to wind it towards you, then the thread has to initially go on the other side. I'm going forward with it. And it is this simple. It takes a little bit of time, but it's this simple. This is done this way because if you use the standard yarning for warp and you're measuring yarn, you can do a whole warp board full of yarn and then pull it off and wrap it, pull it off, excuse me, and wrap it using your hand, chaining it. And then you can actually take that chain and undo it, and you can easily put it on your loom through a rattle. Thread is another story. This is mersed thread. Un-merced thread is the same thing. Mersed thread and un-merced thread will not go through if it's cotton, if you do that kind of particular type of process. So this, being that this is cotton and not polyester or a silken, I have to make sure that I don't let the threads stick together and cause me trouble of bunching and then getting entangled, so that I can save time by not having to untangle all that and getting it into or onto the rattle and through my reed. So I have to individually warp every single one of these. So at the end, I have the other knot from the beginning, the anchor knot, and I put it into the slot, wrap it around again to make sure it stays. And now I can take this particular wound bobbin off of the winder, and there it is. That's what it looks like. Now I store these because you have to make a bunch of them. You don't just have one, as you already know. You have to have a bunch, many. So since you have to have many, I use a ring like this. And I place my bobbins on there per inch, sometimes per half inch, depending on how many there are. So if there's like this one will be 15, so that's per half inch, or an inch. So that could be either or. Now, what I have done is instead of just sitting there in front of the warping board, I have decided to count the number of times that I'm actually winding the certain amount of measurement. So I have a winding count. So in this particular portion of this video, you're going to see me do a winding count. So I have the same amount that I just put on the board. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it by counting the number of turns. So in this particular one, it's 177 for a particular measurement of warp thread. And so all of my bobbins that are in the plastic cubby that you'll see at the end of this video, or towards the end of this video, have the same amount of warp thread on them. So when I go to actually put them onto the warp beam and then into the over the rattle and then through the reed, um, they will be pretty much all the same measurement, maybe off by a half an inch or a couple inches, anywhere between that, for the salvage ends of the actual warp threads. So anyway, I just wanted to share this one with you as well. It takes less time to do if you count it while you're winding. Instead of just sitting there in front of that warp board going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which the warp board is a necessary tool to have. Yes, it is. However, this is just one idea that can be done outside of that. Save some time, you know? Here you see that I have a whole bunch of warped bobbin and not warped, excuse me, measured bobbin of warp thread. And so in each of those cubbies, there's 15, and they're already done. And then I have all those loose ones on the other side here. If you're looking at it at the screen, it's your left side. Those are all loose ones, except for the one I just did show you. And so I have to do all that. Filling this whole entire little plastic cubby actually causes the warp beam to be almost half, maybe a little more than a third filled. So I would have to do this particular plastic cubby like 3 times in order to fill my full warp thread. I'm sorry, my full warp beam with warping thread. Here you will see this is the warp beam. And on the warp beam you see the rings with the bobbin threads on it, or the thread bobbins, I should say. And they're on these little hooks that go all the way across the warp beam. In between each hook there are 2 inches, 1 inch on each side of the little hooks. The rings are also a hook. They open and you can hook them onto the hooks that are on the warp beam and then close it so that the bobbins don't fall off. This warp beam is now ready to begin wrapping the warp thread around it.